always May long is May long in Alberta. It's either amazing or it's snow. That's how I grew up. So
Exactly. Luckily, we have a trailer, so our May long weekend may not be as cold as some of the other people in a tent. But looks like we're live already.
oh, live. Well, we'll give everybody maybe a 30 seconds to
Yeah.
put her in, and then we'll get into some of these common R&D tax questions. But Carlos, and for yourself, any plans for the May long weekend, or you gonna stick around town?
Yeah, it's gonna be close to my birthday, so we're planning to take 3 to 4 days. So it should be nice. It's always perfect because it's close to that time of the year, my birthday. I can get to, enjoy those 4 days, 4 days. So I'm excited about that.
Nice. Well, have a early birthday. It'll be a big one, turning 25 finally. So
yeah, I've been waiting for that for a long time.
Nice. Well, I think we're a minute in, and it looks like we've got everyone here joining us. So we'll get started on the Friday LinkedIn Live here. And just to make quick introductions, hi everybody. It's my name's Eric, and I lead the Western Canadian team on the business development and sales side. And joined by my colleagues today, Carlos, who leads our Eastern team for Eastern Canada, as well on the sales side. But he also gets involved in other areas of business. So, and Kyla, who leads our R&D tax team. So a lot of experience here. And I think the plan was to talk a bit about some of these, common questions or concerns or scenarios that we see with R&D tax. So both with the SR&ED program here in Canada, as well as the US R&D in the States. And there's definitely some differences. But I thought maybe the first place to start would be, oftentimes people ask, who's eligible? And there's some slight differences between the US and the Canadian side. But Kyla, I was going to ask you maybe for the Canadian side for SR&ED, on the technical side, how do you, I know it can be complicated, there's nuance, but how would you sum up, who's eligible or what type of company should be looking at the SR&ED or R&D program?
Yeah, that's a great question, Eric. So the CRA did us a big favor about 2 years ago and simplified their criteria for determining SR&ED eligibility. So if people in the audience were used to filing for SR&ED 5 years ago and had been to any audits, they were always asking 5 questions. So they had 5 different questions that you had to have a check mark by for each of those 5 boxes. They since said, hey, you know what, that's too convoluted. Let's simplify it for ourselves and for the people who are claiming for SR&ED. So now they just simplify it and boil it down to a how and a why. So the why being, why are you actually doing this R&D work? So what is the gap between where you want to go and what's available based on your current industry experience or what's available in the public domain? So if there's open source code to solve a problem, obviously you can leverage that. However, if there is a baked solution in the market, but you need to do more research, more development to make that solution more scalable, more performant, more efficient, depending on what industry you're in. And that gives us what they call a technological uncertainty. So there's uncertainty to get from point A to point B. You're hoping you can solve that uncertainty, get a little bit closer to pushing the needle in the R&D tax world. And that's really where the R&D, the SR&ED credits come in to help support move the needle in any industry. So we see a lot of software companies right now. That seems to be where a lot of our client base is. However, it's not just restricted to software. So we see agriculture, we see pharma tech, we see fintech. So there's no bounds to the type of industry that you can be in. Living in Alberta, I see a lot of oil and gas clients as well come through our doors. So industry isn't the restricting factor there, just being able to have that gap. So that's the why. And then the how is, how are you going about trying to solve that problem? So they actually want you to be testing out your hypotheses. So doing that development side of things. So what have you attempted to try? How much closer to solving that uncertainty did it get you? So did it get you 20% there? What did you learn from doing that test? based on those test results, what are you going to try next? So they like to see that iterative process of what they call systematic approach from the CRA. So they like to see this led to this, this led to this. Each step in the process is gaining more knowledge and being able to create that technological advancement that we're really looking for, which is the outcome of a SR&ED project.
So basically, I was going to say the CRA wants to see companies that are taking risk, right, investing their own money to solve a problem as you described, and see what kind of hypothesis they built and what they learned from it. So basically saying, you're taking this risk, you're investing this money. What did you learn from it? What are you trying to do? What are you trying to solve, right? As long as you've achieved that, like you're talking about different industries, we have clients in the textile industries that are innovating in terms of textiles, how they create new outfits, whether it's for the fashion industry or otherwise. And you wouldn't think, some people think it's just hardware and software, but no, as you said, a lot of other areas, other industries that we see SR&ED, and it's exciting because it's not just, the obvious developers and engineers. Jumping a little bit on that, in terms of expenses, Kyla, what are some of the expenses that can be claimed under SR&ED that you see? Obviously salaries, contractors. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the CRA kind of bulks our types of expenses into three main buckets. One being salaried employees. So Canadian-based employees that have T4 salaries are part of your salary-based expense pool. And then contractors as well. So if you're employing contractors, once again, they need to be based in Canada. So the work needs to be in Canada. One of the driving factors of the SR&ED program is decreasing the employment rate or increasing the employment rate to make sure that we're creating jobs within our country and within our provinces. So we're able to use deemed contractor expenditures that are working on the project. There are some caveats. You need to maintain the IP of the work that the contractor is doing, have creative control over the work they're doing. So if the contractor is really integrated into your project team to work together holistically, those costs can be eligible. And then the last main category is any materials. So if you're more along like a textile company, as you used as an example there, Carlos, so if there was any materials that were transformed or consumed in the purpose of the SR&ED process that are deemed as an expense, we can claim those as eligible expenses. So we take a look at those three main buckets. And then there's two ways of calculating the overhead that goes along with any sort of project, running your business as a whole. It's the overhead of a project. So there's two main ways of calculating it. One is using a proxy method, and that's just a percentage, more of an estimate calculation based on your salary spend. So if you have higher amounts of salaries, that tends to be the more straightforward way to do it. Kind of like on your personal taxes, when you're calculating your stay-at-home credit, you can either use the X amount of days I worked at home per year, and they give you a flat rate for those days. Or you can do the more traditional method and get all of your receipts and calculate it more of a line by line item. That way tends to be a lot more detailed, but it can be more lucrative in the long term if you have a lot of overhead expenditures, if you're more in the kind of the engineering world where you do have a lot more hardware than software.
Well, that makes sense. And it's, I think one of the things with preparing the claims that I wanted to touch on is, right, we have the eligible work, we have the expenses. I know there's a couple of things that sometimes I see with claims that maybe common mistakes. And I was curious if there was any that maybe I get your comment, Kyla and Carlos. I sometimes will see people when preparing a claim look more at business challenges, or sometimes I think maybe on the eligibility side, the difference between trial and error and technological uncertainty, and how do you determine that? Like, I know sometimes it can be difficult, but is there any sort of guidelines or guideposts on those types of things?
Yeah, I'd say maybe one of the common roadblocks that we have to encounter is the difference between a business objective and a technological uncertainty. There are cases where a certain solution in an industry doesn't exist from a commercial standpoint. So it's novel in the way that it's not commercially available to anybody It's not something you can just pull off the shelf and plug and play into your industry and it works. A lot of times that does drive on technological uncertainty, and this is where our team will come in and they'll dig through the work, meet with your team, be able to have that one-on-one conversations. Our technical solutions managers are all engineers by trade or have some sort of, if they're not engineers such as myself, we do have a couple of university degrees behind our names. So we are very familiar with the context of each industry. So we're not necessarily accountants by trade. We do make sure we have the people who are more familiar with the specific industries they're working in to ask the right questions to see if we can pull out that uncertainty of how we're advancing the technology, not necessarily advancing the commercial availability of a product. So most of the time we can find one and the other. There are occasions where, yes, there's a commercial need, but the technology is there and it's just doing some standard practice work to make it fit into that new niche. However, that's not always the case either. So there's some nuance there, but that's kind of the main difference, is the difference between a commercial need and a technological uncertainty.
That's great. Carla, what would you say is the best way for a company to determine if the work that they're doing is eligible for a claim or not? I mean, I know we can, definitely work with them and do a session to try to understand the work, but is there any tips, any guidance that you can provide to give them an idea or even think maybe I should explore this?
Yeah.
Well, I would interrupt and I would say, call Carlos or call myself, Kyla, and we'll
that was going to be my first thing. Absolutely. We are here to help. We're going to facilitate those conversations as much as we can. We do have a software solution as well that's able to integrate with financial systems, so we can get a baseline estimate of financial spend on projects, just to kind of get a rough estimate of how much expenditure has happened throughout the year. And then from a technical standpoint, talking to the experts, we can always bring in one of our solutions managers who are able to assist Carlos and Eric in those calls to determine if there is the how and the why. So yeah, work with us. We're happy to help. The CRA does also have some self-assessment tools on their website. So if you go to the CRA's website, they do have a couple, it's a PDF tool where you can enter your information and they'll give you it doesn't go to the CRA, so it's risk-free. You don't have to worry about that. So there is those tools available to the public as well through the CRA website.
Nice. Do you see any limitations in terms of size of a potential claim, like the smallest to the biggest? Like, what would you say if the company is considered, well, I just have one person working on this project, it's my engineer, I don't think it's big enough. What do you say to that?
I mean, never leave money on the table. The CRA is going to audit regardless of the size of your claim. They say they're going to audit 20% of claims. So you can expect to see an audit once every 5 years. And one of the things we see that people getting audited for is they haven't been audited in a while. So audits definitely aren't something to be afraid of. We make sure that we're maximizing everybody's claim and being able to have the supporting documentation. I alluded to our software platform earlier, but we're able to integrate with some of the time tracking systems as well, so we can get better estimates on time that's been spent through Jira, GitHub for our software clients, and being able to analyze different data from your team as well to make sure we have the right supporting documentation. That's part of the process as well. So as far as people not thinking it's worth it, always come talk to us first and we can advise on what the next steps are. We can advise on the size of the claim based on the knowledge we have, and then advise on what the best next steps are.
Yeah, and I would agree, and I would echo. I think with audits, people sometimes get nervous or not wanting to get audited, which of course it's an impact on having your return. But I think the key takeaway is like you said, if you claim shred for X amount of time, you will be audited at some point, right? And there's it's not anything to be afraid of. You just want to make sure that you have the strongest, most well-prepared claim. And sometimes the way I try to express it to people is, this is your entitlement. You should claim 100% of your entitlement. There's no benefit to a conservative claim. You never overclaim. You would never claim work that's not eligible. But I sometimes have people ask, should I claim less so that I don't get audited? And I'd say, no, you claim if you have eligible work, claim your eligible work. Don't go over it, but yeah, that's kind of hammer on that sometimes.
Totally. And with that being said, I'm going to take a look at our time, do a quick time check here. We're at the end of our 15 minutes already, which is, it always goes quickly in these sessions. So Carlos, Eric, it's been a pleasure as always. And thanks everybody for hopping in and chatting with us and listening to us chat about R&D in Canada this week. And looking forward to seeing you at our next live event.
Yeah, I think we could, this is what we do on a regular basis anyway. So it's only 15 minutes. I think between the three of us, we could talk about we talk about R&D tax all day. So if anybody has any questions, we talked more about Canada today, but on the US side as well, again, ping any of us. We're happy to help, and have a great Friday, everybody. We'll talk with you again.
Thanks, everybody.
Cheers.